The dryer was still warm when I found it. Not in a jewelry box. Not wrapped with a card. Just tucked inside the front pocket of my husband's work jeans, mixed in with a greasy receipt. Our laundry room smelled like detergent and damp cotton, and for a second I honestly thought I'd grabbed the wrong pair. My fingers closed around something cold. A thin silver bracelet with a tiny star charm. My brain tried to be kind to me. A customer forgot it. He found it somewhere. Maybe it's for me. Then I flipped it over and saw the engraving. L. Not my initial. My throat tightened, but the strangest thing happened. I went quiet. I thought about all the times I'd asked Derek a simple question, and he'd made me feel dramatic for needing an answer. The sigh, the eye roll, the way he'd say my name like it was the problem. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask a single question. When I found the bracelet, I simply put it back where it belonged. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is stay silent and watch what someone does next. I slid it right back into the pocket, under a wadded paper towel he used for grease. I folded the jeans neatly. My hand brushed the little shelf above the washer. Stain remover, vinegar spray, and a half-used bottle of pepper oil my sister swore would wake up my cooking. I didn't use it, I just noticed it. Like you notice a locked door after you hear a creak. Then I heard keys at the back door. Derek's voice floated in, bright and easy. "Babe, you home?" "Laundry," I called, and even my own calm surprised me. He stepped into the doorway holding a Starbucks cup like it was an apology. My name was spelled wrong on it. Murray Ann, like always. He kissed my forehead, quick and practiced. "Long day?" he asked. "Normal," I said. His eyes flicked once toward the clothes pile. Just once. It was so small I could have missed it if my life hadn't just split down the middle. "Those mine?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm putting your work stuff away." A flash of relief crossed his face and vanished. I kept my expression soft, the way I always did when I wanted the house to stay peaceful. Only now, peace felt like camouflage. He wandered to the kitchen. The fridge door hung open while he rummaged. "Might head out later," he said. "Quick meeting." "Sure," I replied, like the word meeting didn't suddenly taste like metal. He talked about a customer. A part that didn't arrive on time. Nothing that mattered. I nodded at the right moments and sipped the coffee. It tasted burnt, or maybe that was just my mouth. Then he walked into the bedroom to change, and his phone buzzed on the counter behind him. The screen lit up for a second. Lauren. No message preview, just the name, bright and clean, like it had a right to be there. I didn't touch his phone. I didn't need to. The bracelet was already back in his pocket, waiting for him to carry it wherever he thought I wasn't looking. I carried the folded jeans into our bedroom and laid them on his side of the bed, neat and innocent. Then I sat down and rested my hands in my lap until the shaking slowed. Because I wasn't only watching to see who he was with. I was watching to see what else he thought he could take from me while I stayed quiet. Derek left an hour later with the kind of casual confidence that used to make me feel safe. He stood by the door, patting his pockets like a man making sure he had his keys and wallet, and he smiled at me the way you smile at someone you don't want to worry. "Don't wait up," he said. "I won't," I lied, because I already knew sleep wasn't an option tonight. When the door shut, the house didn't get quiet. It got loud in a different way. The refrigerator hum, the heater clicking on, the tiny groan of the floorboards settling. All the ordinary sounds that usually meant home, now sounding like witnesses. I walked back into the laundry room like I'd forgotten something. The jeans were still folded on the bed, exactly where I'd placed them. I stood there a moment, staring at that pocket like it could stare back. Then, I did something I'm not proud of, but I won't pretend I didn't. On the little shelf above the washer was the bottle of pepper oil, something I used in cooking when I wanted a little heat without thinking too hard. I unscrewed the cap and the smell hit the back of my throat, sharp and bright, like a warning. I dipped the tip of a cotton swab into it, just the smallest amount. Barely a shine. My hands were steady. That surprised me most. I slid the bracelet out, rubbed a thin whisper of oil along the inside, where skin would touch, and put it back exactly the way I'd found it, tucked under that wadded paper towel, like it belonged there. Like it was nothing. It wasn't about hurting him. It was about marking the truth. Then I washed my hands twice and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the grain of the wood until my eyes stopped burning. When Derek came home, it was close to midnight. I heard the key. Then a pause, like he'd lost the rhythm of entering his own house. He stepped inside and tried to move normally, but his body betrayed him. His shoulders were stiff, his jaw clenched, and he kept shifting his weight as if the air itself was irritating. "You're still up?" he asked, too bright. "I couldn't sleep," I said. He nodded and walked toward the kitchen, but halfway there he stopped and subtly adjusted his waistband with a quick tug, the way someone does when they've got a rock in their shoe and they're pretending they don't. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said too fast. "Just new detergent, I think." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was ridiculous. The kind of ridiculous that would have been a sitcom if it wasn't my marriage. He opened the fridge, stood there staring into it like milk might offer wisdom, then closed it without taking anything. "Do we have, that anti-itch cream?" he asked, not meeting my eyes. "In the bathroom," I said. He moved toward the hallway, then stopped again, pressing his lips together. His hand went to his wrist, rubbing in small circles like he couldn't help it. My stomach dropped a little. Wrist, not waist, which meant he'd worn it, or someone close to him had. He disappeared into the bathroom, and I heard the cabinet open and close. A few seconds later, he called out, irritated, "Why do we have 6 half-empty bottles of everything?" I should have been offended. Instead, I felt the strangest flash of relief. Because there it was, the Derek I knew, complaining, deflecting, trying to turn discomfort into my fault. "I like options," I called back, and my voice was steady enough to pass for normal. He came out scratching his wrist openly now, face pinched like he was trying not to swear. He held up a bottle. "This stuff does nothing. Try cold water," I said gently. "It helps." He stared at me for a second like he couldn't figure out whether I was being kind or clever. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. He snatched it up so fast it made a little slap sound against the granite. He turned his back to me immediately, shoulders hunching like a teenager hiding a secret. "Yeah," he murmured. "I'm home. No, it's fine. Just, yeah, I know." I didn't move, I didn't lean, I didn't ask, but I watched the way his free hand kept rubbing his wrist like it was on fire. He ended the call and cleared his throat. "Work," he said. "Of course," I replied. He tried to sit on the couch and immediately stood back up, grimacing like an old man with a bad knee. He glanced at me, caught himself, and forced a laugh. "Guess I'm not 20 anymore," he said. "None of us are," I said, and for a moment the line almost sounded like a joke between spouses. Almost. He went to bed early, claiming he was exhausted. I waited until his breathing settled into that deep, careless sleep. Then I walked into our bedroom and looked at the folded jeans. The pocket was empty. My chest tightened, but not from surprise, from confirmation. Because now I knew the bracelet wasn't a mistake. It had a destination. And whoever Elle was, she was close enough that Derek couldn't even explain a rash without calling her. I stood there in the dark, hand resting on the bedpost, and made myself a promise. I wasn't going to beg for the truth. I was going to let him hand it to me, piece by piece. While he thought I still didn't know how to see, morning arrived like it didn't know what had happened. Sunlight slid across our kitchen floor, soft and ordinary, touching the same chair where Derek used to sit and complain about the news, the weather, the price of eggs. Whatever kept him from talking about anything real. He came out of the bedroom rubbing his wrist like he'd been attacked by invisible mosquitoes. "Still itchy?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral, like I was asking if he wanted toast. "It's nothing," he muttered, and then immediately added, "I've got an early appointment. Don't wait on me for dinner." He poured coffee, barely tasting it, and avoided looking at me the whole time. The lie in his body was louder than anything he said. "Okay," I replied. He kissed my cheek, fast and distracted, then patted his pockets again, keys, wallet, phone. A man checking his tools. At the door he paused and forced a smile. "You good?" I smiled back. Always. And there it was. The version of me he'd trained himself to expect. Calm, agreeable, low maintenance. The kind of wife who made life easier. The door shut, the engine started, the car backed out. I waited until the sound disappeared down the street before I let my shoulders drop. I didn't run to the bedroom like a teenager in a bad movie. I didn't tear through drawers. I just moved slowly, like a woman walking through her own home for the first time, noticing what she used to ignore. In the laundry room, I opened the hamper and pulled out the jeans again, more to prove something to myself than to search for answers. The pocket was still empty, but something else was there. A receipt, crumpled, greasy at the edges, the kind you'd normally toss without thinking. I smoothed it out on the washer lid and read it twice. It wasn't for groceries. It wasn't for gas. It was a payment confirmation for a small office supply store. Not suspicious by itself. Except the email printed at the top wasn't his business email. It was an address I didn't recognize, with my name in it. My name. I stared at those letters like they'd been typed by a stranger who'd borrowed my face. A faint sound came out of my throat, half laugh, half disbelief. Because the absurd part of my brain decided this was the moment to think. Really, Marianne? You can remember every birthday in this family, but you don't know you apparently have a secret email? I folded the receipt and slid it into my pocket like it was evidence at a crime scene, then stood at the sink and ran cold water until my hands stopped feeling numb. I told myself one thing, quietly, like a rule. Start with facts, not feelings. Facts don't get called dramatic. I went to the kitchen table and opened a folder where we kept household papers, mortgage statements, insurance, the boring stuff that made adulthood feel like a full-time job. I flipped through slowly, listening for the sound of my own breathing. There it was, a letter from the bank, addressed to me, that I hadn't opened because Derek always handled the mail. The envelope had already been steamed and resealed so neatly most people wouldn't notice unless they'd spent years learning how to spot tiny changes in a man's mood. I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a notice about an account update. Nothing dramatic on the surface, just a dry paragraph about contact information and electronic statements. But the new email listed was the same one from the receipt. And the mailing address? A post office box. Not ours. For a full minute I sat there, reading the same lines over and over, my heart trying to climb out of my chest. I wanted to stand up and scream the kind of scream that shakes pictures off walls. Instead, I did what I'd been doing since the bracelet. I stayed quiet. I picked up the phone and called the number on the letter. The automated system greeted me with cheerful efficiency, offering me 17 options I didn't need, in a voice that sounded like it had never known betrayal a day in its life. Press 1 for checking. Press 2 for savings. Press 3 if you'd like to listen to our menu again. I pressed the wrong number twice because my hands were shaking. Then I actually laughed. One sharp, humorless sound. Because of course I did. My husband might be stealing my identity, but heaven forbid I navigate a phone tree on the first try. When a real person finally answered, her voice was calm and warm. "This is Hannah. How can I help you today?" I swallowed. "Hi, I'm calling about an account update I didn't authorize." There was a pause, not long, but enough to tell me she heard something in my voice that wasn't just confusion. "Can you verify a few details for me?" Hannah asked gently. I did. Name, social, date of birth. The basics that suddenly felt too intimate to say out loud. Then Hannah said, carefully, "Mrs. Holt, I'm seeing recent changes to your contact information, and I'm also seeing 2 recent credit inquiries attached to your profile." My mouth went dry. "What kind of inquiries?" "A new line of credit application," she said, "and a secondary card request." My stomach turned. I gripped the edge of the table. "I didn't apply for anything," I whispered. "I understand," Hannah replied, and her voice softened further, like she'd moved from customer service to something more human. "Do you recognize the post office box listed here?" "No," I said. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'd like you to come in today if you can, in person, and—" "Marianne?" She hesitated before saying my first name, like she decided I needed that small kindness. "Are you safe at home?" I stared at the resealed envelope in my hand. Safe. That word suddenly had layers. "I'm fine," I said, even though I wasn't sure what fine meant anymore. Hannah lowered her voice. "Bring a photo ID. And if possible, bring any documentation you have. This is important." When I hung up, I sat in the silence and looked around my kitchen. The magnets on the fridge, the dish towel hanging crooked, the chair Derek always leaned back on like he owned the world. I wasn't going to ask him a single question. Not yet. Because now I understood something the bracelet had only hinted at. This wasn't just about where he was going at night. This was about what he was doing to my name while I was still making his dinner. Hannah worked behind a glass door that always made me feel like I needed permission to breathe. The bank lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper, clean but tired. People sat in rows of plastic chairs, staring at screens, waiting for their names to be called. Like the whole building ran on quiet impatience. I kept my face calm. I kept my shoulders down. I walked up to the front desk and gave my name like I wasn't carrying a small explosion in my purse. The young receptionist smiled like my life was simple. "Do you have an appointment?" "Yes," I said. "With Hannah." I could feel my heart thudding, but my voice behaved. She handed me a visitor badge and told me to sit. I chose a chair facing the entrance, not because I was paranoid, because I was learning how quickly the world can turn when someone else controls the story. While I waited, I looked down and realized I'd put my shirt on inside out. Not dramatically inside out, just enough that the tag was poking the side of my neck. Of course, if my husband was going to quietly rearrange my life, the universe was going to balance it out by making me look like a woman who couldn't dress herself. I tucked the tag back in, pressed my lips together, and almost laughed. Almost. Hannah appeared a few minutes later. She wasn't much older than 30, hair pulled back, eyes alert in a way that wasn't judgmental, just careful. "Marianne?" she asked. When I stood, my knees felt too loose. She led me down a hallway into a small office with a desk, 2 chairs, and a framed photo of a golden retriever that looked like it had never been lied to. "Thank you for coming in," she said, closing the door. "I know this is stressful." I nodded, because if I opened my mouth too wide, something raw might come out. Hannah pulled up my profile on her computer and turned the screen slightly so I could see. She slid a paper across the desk. "This is the contact information change request," she said. There it was. My name, my social, my date of birth, my everything. But the email wasn't mine. The mailing address wasn't mine. The phone number listed was close enough to feel intentional, but not mine. "They changed it in person?" I asked. "No," Hannah said. "It was submitted digitally and then verified through a call." I stared at the page. A call? From who? Hannah didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked, "Do you share accounts with your husband?" The question was gentle, but it landed like a stone. "Yes," I said. "We have joint accounts." Hannah nodded slowly. "I can't tell you who made the call without an investigation request, but I can tell you it was someone who knew your identifying information." My mouth went dry. "So, someone who lives in my house." Hannah didn't confirm it. She didn't need to. Her silence did enough. She slid a second page toward me. "These are the credit inquiries. 2 within the last 10 days. I looked at the dates and felt my stomach twist. 10 days ago, Derek had taken me out for dinner and insisted I order dessert. He'd laughed when the server asked if it was a special occasion. It had been. Just not the kind I thought. "Did anything actually get opened?" I asked. "Yes," Hannah said, and pointed. "A card was approved, and it was used." My hands curled into fists on my lap. "Used for what?" Hannah hesitated, then clicked to a transaction history and printed it out. She handed me the paper like she was handing me something sharp. It wasn't thousands. It wasn't some dramatic number that would have made this easier to explain. It was smaller purchases, office supplies, shipping fees, a few online payments that looked innocent until you saw them stacked together like bricks. Then I saw one line item that made my breath hitch. A mailbox rental. A post office box. Not the one from the letter. A second one. "Why would there be 2? I whispered. Hannah's voice stayed calm. "Sometimes people do that to separate different types of mail, or to make it harder to track." I swallowed. My tongue felt too thick. "What do I do?" Hannah leaned forward. "First, we freeze what we can freeze. We file an internal fraud report. We update your contact information back to you using in-person verification only. And you'll need to file a police report. I'm sorry." I stared at the desk, at a tiny scratch in the laminate, and tried to keep my breathing even. I'm not trying to ruin anyone," I said, and immediately hated myself for saying it. Hannah's expression softened, but her tone didn't indulge me. "Marianne, someone is using your identity. This isn't about being nice. This is about protecting yourself." I nodded slowly. The words were simple. They were also a door I hadn't walked through before. Then Hannah said, "There's something else." She pulled up a scanned document on her screen and turned it toward me. A form authorizing access, not full power, not full control, but enough to make changes, enough to move things. At the bottom was a signature that looked like mine if you'd seen it once and tried to copy it from memory. The letters leaned the wrong way. The loop of the M was too sharp. But it was close enough that in a hurry someone could say, "Looks fine." My throat tightened. Hannah watched me carefully. "Have you ever signed anything like this?" "No," I said, and my voice finally cracked, just a hair. "Never." She nodded once, as if the last piece clicked into place. "Okay, then we treat this as fraud." My phone vibrated in my bag like it had been waiting for that moment. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway. A message from Derek. "How's your day going?" For a second I almost admired the nerve, the normalness of it. The way he could ask me that while my name was being peeled off me, layer by layer. I didn't answer. I set the phone face down and looked back at the signature on the screen. Hannah slid a pen across the desk. "I'm going to need you to sign here," she said, "so we can lock this down." My hand hovered, not because I was afraid to sign, because I realized something I'd never fully understood until that moment. My signature was the one thing Derek had been practicing, and I had no idea how many places he'd already used it. I signed the bank form with a hand that didn't feel like mine. Not because I doubted what I was doing, because the act of signing suddenly felt intimate and dangerous, like handing someone a key after you've realized they've been copying it for weeks. Hannah made copies. She spoke in a steady voice about freezes and flags and next steps, but I could tell she was choosing her words carefully so I wouldn't fall apart right there in her little office. Before I left, she slid a thin folder into my hands. "Keep everything you have," she said. "Dates, letters, anything that feels off, and, if you go home, don't tell him you came here." I nodded. It was strange, walking out of the building into bright afternoon sun like I hadn't just found out my name had been rented out behind my back. The sky looked too blue for what I was carrying. People were laughing in the parking lot. A man was loading a stroller into his trunk and humming to himself. The world kept spinning with no respect for my timing. I sat in my car and didn't start it right away. I just rested my forehead against the steering wheel and breathed in slow counts, the way I'd taught myself to do on hard days at work. My phone buzzed again. Derek. This time it wasn't a text, it was a call. I watched it ring until it stopped, then I watched it ring again. For a second, I imagined answering, saying, very politely, "Hi, quick question, why am I apparently renting 2 mailboxes and opening credit lines?" But I could already hear his voice in my head, the fake concern, the practiced confusion. "What are you talking about? You must have misunderstood. Are you feeling okay?" No. I wasn't giving him that stage yet. I drove to Denise's house instead. Denise lived 20 minutes away in a modest neighborhood with small yards and too many lawn decorations. She'd always had a thing for those tiny wind spinners that look cheerful even when the rest of life isn't. When I pulled up, she opened the door before I even knocked, like she'd been standing there watching the street. Her face changed the second she saw me. "Oh, honey?" That almost broke me. Not the bank forms, not the forged signature, just the simple fact that my sister looked at me like she could see the bruises that didn't show. I handed her the folder and she read silently at the kitchen table, lips moving without sound. Halfway through, she stopped and looked up. "2 mailboxes?" she said. "Who does he think he is? Some kind of spy?" I made a noise that might have been a laugh. Denise slapped the table lightly. "No, actually, don't laugh. We are not laughing. We are filing things." She stood up so fast her chair screeched. "Okay, we're going to do this step by step. Denise has a gift. She can turn panic into a checklist." She pulled out a notebook and started writing headings like we were planning a family vacation instead of a small legal war. Freeze. Report. Protect your job. Protect your house. Then she paused, pen hovering. "Do you have your birth certificate?" she asked. I stared at her. Why would I have my birth certificate on a Tuesday? She pointed the pen at me like I was the unreasonable one. "Because life is rude, Marianne. Life doesn't schedule betrayal for weekends." I laughed, quietly this time, and it came with a tear I wiped away before it fell. Denise called a friend of hers, Luis, who worked in law enforcement. She didn't explain much, just said, "It's identity stuff. It's bad." Luis agreed to meet us later that evening, off the record, to tell us what to do and what not to do. While Denise talked, I sat at her kitchen table and stared at her paper towel holder, the salt shaker, the little crack in her tile floor. Ordinary things. Anchors. Denise ended the call and leaned toward me. "Listen," she said. "We're gonna handle this, but you have to promise me something." "What?" "If he starts acting sweet, you don't fall for it. If he starts acting angry, you don't take the bait. You stay boring." I blinked. Boring. Yes. Denise nodded like she was delivering wisdom from the mountain. Boring is safe. Boring is invisible. You let him think you're still the same Marianne who apologizes when he bumps into the table. I swallowed hard. Okay. Denise reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her voice softened. "I know you want to ask him why. But why doesn't protect you. Proof protects you." On the drive home, my stomach churned with every mile. I pulled into our driveway and saw Derek's car already there. He was home early. My heart kicked once hard, like it was trying to warn me. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at the front door. Then I lifted my chin, picked up my purse, and walked inside like I had nothing to hide. Derek was in the kitchen, smiling too wide. He looked up like he'd been waiting. "Hey," he said. "I was thinking we should get some paperwork handled tonight, just a quick signature." He held up a sheet of paper and a pen, like it was a normal favor between spouses. I took one step closer, and my eyes landed on the line where my name was printed. My name, ready to be used again. He held the paper and pen out like a peace offering. Not like a weapon. That's what made it scarier. "Just a quick signature," Derek said, smiling too wide. "It'll make things easier." I stepped closer and let my eyes move over the page without rushing. The top looked official enough. Clean font, neat margins, a few boxes and lines. The kind of document people sign because they're tired, because they trust, because dinner is getting cold. My name was printed there, waiting. I felt Denise's voice in my head, calm and firm. "Stay boring." So I did the most boring thing a woman can do to a man who wants speed. I read. Derek shifted his weight, his fingers tapped the pen, not impatient enough to look guilty, just restless enough to feel wrong. "What is it?" I asked, still looking at the page. "Just stuff for work," he said. "A form, normal." I nodded like that answered anything. I kept reading. It was written in dense, polite language. Authorization. Access. Designated contact. The kind of words that sound harmless until you've sat in a bank office and learned what they can do. My stomach tightened when I saw an address line that wasn't ours. Not our street. Not our zip code. A mailbox number. I didn't react. I didn't let my face change. I only did one small, ordinary thing. I reached into the drawer beside the fridge like I was looking for a paperclip. Inside was the chaos drawer. Rubber bands, old keys that fit nothing, a birthday candle shaped like a number we'd already passed. I touched the candle and almost laughed. Of course it was still there. We keep the useless things. We throw away the warnings. "I need my glasses," I said, still calm. Derek blinked. "Your glasses are on the nightstand." "They were," I said mildly. "Now I can't find them." He exhaled through his nose, trying to keep it friendly. "Babe, it's fine, you don't need." "I do," I said as gently as possible. "My eyes aren't what they used to be." That line was partly true and partly strategic, and the irony tasted bitter. He'd been hinting I was forgetful. Let him think I was just slow. Derek turned and stomped toward the bedroom to search. I watched his back go rigid as soon as he wasn't facing me. The moment he disappeared, I slid my own pen out of the drawer and tucked it in my pocket. Then I lifted the paper off the counter, walked to the sink, and held it under the brighter light by the window like I was being practical. I didn't take long. I didn't rummage. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just copied the mailbox number onto the back of an envelope with a shaky hand. Because facts don't argue back. Derek returned holding my glasses like he'd won something. He dropped them into my palm. "See?" he said, forcing a laugh. "Crisis solved." I put them on slowly. Then I looked up at him and smiled a little, the way I used to smile when I didn't want an argument to start. "I'm going to read it," I said. Derek's smile tightened. "There's nothing to read." "I like reading," I replied, and for a second the humor slipped out before I could stop it. "It's kind of my thing." He stared at me like he wasn't sure if I was joking. I lowered my eyes back to the document and let the silence stretch just enough to be uncomfortable. He tried again, softer. "Marianne, I'm just trying to take care of stuff. Why are you making it a thing? I wanted to say, because you already made it a thing when you used my name like it was yours. Instead, I stayed boring. I'm not making it anything, I said. I'll sign it tomorrow, after I've had time. His jaw flexed. Tomorrow is too late. Then it wasn't a quick signature, I said quietly. There it was, the smallest boundary, the simplest sentence, and it hit him like a closed door. For a moment, he looked like he might snap. Then his expression shifted into something that tried to sound concerned. You've been off lately, he said. You're stressed. Maybe you're not thinking clearly. My skin went cold. The words were so smooth, so rehearsed. I tilted my head just slightly like I was considering it. Maybe, I said. That's why I shouldn't sign anything fast. Derek stared at me. Then he laughed once, sharp. Fine, he said, snatching the paper back. Forget it. He crumpled it halfway, then stopped himself, flattened it, and tucked it under his arm like he'd remembered it was evidence of something. I'm going to shower, he muttered. When he walked away, I let my knees soften, just for a second. Just long enough to feel how close I'd come to shaking. In the bathroom, the water turned on. I moved quietly to the hall closet where we kept old files. I didn't dig. I didn't tear through anything. I only reached for the folder labeled with our taxes and pulled it out like I was checking something boring. My phone buzzed in my pocket, one small vibration. A message from Denise. Luis can meet tonight. 8 o'clock. Don't bring Derek. I stared at the screen, then looked toward the bathroom door. The water kept running, and in that steady, ordinary sound I realized something that made my stomach drop all over again. Derek hadn't come home early to be sweet. He'd come home early to get my signature, before I could figure out what he'd already done. The shower ran longer than it needed to. I stood in the hallway with my hands folded like I was waiting for a kettle to boil, listening to water hit tile. In our house, the sound used to mean something normal. End of the day, soap, steam, sleep. Tonight, it sounded like cover. I went into the kitchen and opened the folder I'd pulled from the closet. The paper edges felt too loud in my fingers. I flipped through slowly, not because I didn't know what I was looking for, but because moving too fast made me feel like I was the one doing something wrong. There were copies of old tax returns, mortgage statements, and the kind of boring documents you only notice when they're missing. I found the last time we refinanced the house. Derek had handled most of it. I remembered sitting at a desk signing where the guy pointed, trusting my husband, because that's what wives do when they still believe they're on the same team. My chest tightened. I heard the shower shut off. I slid the folder back exactly where it had been. Not hidden, not dramatic, just returned to its place, like I'd never touched it. When Derek came out, towel around his waist, hair dripping, he looked at me like he was checking the temperature of a room. You okay? He asked. Fine, I said, just tired. He nodded, and I could see the calculation behind his eyes. He wanted to ask where I'd been. He wanted to demand. But he kept it light, the way he always did when he needed my cooperation. Come to bed, he said, in a minute. He shrugged like he didn't care and walked into the bedroom. The second the door clicked shut, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. At 7:30, I picked up my keys. Derek's voice drifted from the bedroom. Where are you going? I didn't stop walking. If I stopped, I'd have to act. I'm going to grab something for my stomach, I called back. I'm not sleeping like this. He appeared in the hallway, one eyebrow raised. At this hour? I forced a small laugh. If I don't go now, I'll just pace around and make you miserable too. He stared at me a second too long. Then he softened. Do you want me to come with you? My heart banged once against my ribs. Stay boring. No, I said, gentle. You'll fall asleep standing up, I'll be quick. He sighed, like I was being difficult for wanting a quiet errand. Fine, lock the door. I will, I promised. I drove with my hands tight on the wheel, not trusting them to relax. I didn't go to the store. I drove to a small diner on the edge of town where the lights were bright and the tables were sticky, in that familiar, honest way. Luis was already there in a booth, wearing plain clothes and the kind of face that looked calm because it had seen worse. Denise sat across from him, arms crossed, posture screaming. I am holding myself back from going to jail on your behalf. She saw me and immediately stood. You made it. Luis nodded to me. Marianne? I slid into the booth, and for a second I didn't know what to do with my hands. Denise shoved a menu toward me like it was armor. "Order something," she whispered. "Even if you don't eat it, it makes you look normal." I stared at her. "I'm at a diner. I am normal." Denise's eyes widened. "Oh, look at you. Betrayed for 48 hours and suddenly you're funny." I let out a quiet laugh that surprised me. It wasn't joy. It was my body remembering it could still do something other than panic. Luis leaned in slightly. "Okay, tell me what you know for sure." So I did. Bracelet, mailbox numbers, the bank, the forged signature, the paper Derek tried to rush me into signing. Luis listened without interrupting. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "This isn't just cheating," he said. "This is someone trying to put you in a box where you can't fight back." Denise snapped. "He already tried the she's forgetful thing." Luis nodded once. "That part matters. If he's laying groundwork to paint you as unstable, he's not improvising, he's planning." My mouth went dry. "What do I do?" Luis held up a hand. "I'm not your lawyer, but I can tell you what helps and what hurts." He ticked points off with his fingers. "Don't warn him. Don't threaten him. Don't sign anything you don't fully understand. Keep copies of everything. Dates matter, and if you can, keep your routine boring so he doesn't feel pressure to change his plan." Denise muttered, "Boring? Great, I've been training my whole life for this." Luis almost smiled. "Also, if you're worried he'll try to move money, you need to document what you have right now, not tomorrow. Tonight." My stomach tightened. "He already tried tonight." Luis's gaze sharpened. "Then he's accelerating." Denise reached into her purse, pulled out her notebook, and shoved it at me like a teacher. "Write down everything you remember, times, phrases, that look he does when he's lying." "I don't know if I can," I started. Denise cut me off. "Marianne, you raised kids. You survived your mother-in-law's casserole opinions. You can do this." I snorted before I could stop myself. Her casseroles were a hate crime. Luis actually chuckled just once, then sobered again. "Here's the next step," he said quietly. "Those mailbox numbers. Don't go alone. If you're going to check locations, do it with someone. And if he tries to push a medical evaluation on you, don't fight it emotionally. Ask for everything in writing." I stared at the table. My throat burned. "He's gonna come home and act like I'm the problem," I whispered. Denise squeezed my hand under the table. "Let him. We're not here to win an argument. We're here to win your life back." When I left the diner, I checked the clock in the car. 8:47. I had been gone longer than quick. My phone buzzed once with a message from Derek. "Where are you? I'm worried." I read it twice, not because I believed it, because I knew what was coming next. And when I pulled into my driveway, the porch light was on, bright enough to feel like an interrogation. Derek opened the front door before I even stepped out of the car. He stood there barefoot, calm face, soft voice. "I called your supervisor," he said. My blood went cold. "I told them you've been under a lot of stress." "I called your supervisor," Derek said again, like repeating it would turn it into a kindness. "I told them you've been under a lot of stress." For a second I just stood there with my hand on the car door, keys still in my fingers, the cold air catching the back of my throat. I wanted to say 100 things. Don't touch my work. Don't use my name. Don't build a story about me in rooms I'm not in. Instead, I took one slow breath and walked past him into the house like I was stepping around a puddle. "Why would you do that?" I asked softly. He followed me into the kitchen, barefoot, calm face, eyes a little too shiny. He was performing concern the way some people perform prayer, loud enough for others to hear. "I was worried," he said. "You didn't answer. You've been different. I'm trying to help." Help, that word again. The same word that had been printed on forms and used in conversations where my consent was treated like a technicality. "I'm safe," I said. "I'm home, and I'm asking you not to contact my workplace again." His smile tightened. "So now I'm the bad guy for caring?" I looked at him and realized this was the part he liked best. The part where the discussion wasn't about what he'd done, but about my reaction to it. I kept my voice level. "You can care without calling my supervisor." He leaned against the counter like he owned the room. "They need to know, in case you have a moment." "A moment," I repeated, and the phrase sat between us like something rotten. He nodded, easing into the role. "I've seen it before. People get overwhelmed, they forget things. It's nothing to be ashamed of." There it was, smooth and careful. Not an accusation, a diagnosis. My skin went cold, but I let my face stay plain, boring. Who did you speak to? I asked. He hesitated. Just the office. I didn't say much. What did you say? I asked again, same tone, like I was asking what he wanted for breakfast. He sighed, annoyed that I wouldn't take the bait. I said you've been stressed and you might need some time. That's it. I nodded slowly. Okay. He blinked. He'd expected tears or yelling. My calm confused him. I'm going to bed, I said, and started toward the hallway. He stepped in front of me. Wait. Marianne, we should talk about it. We are talking, I said, still quiet. His voice sharpened. You're being weird. I tilted my head like I was considering it. Maybe I'm tired. He tried a softer angle. We could schedule you an appointment. Just to be sure, I can come with you. The kindness felt rehearsed, like a script he'd already practiced with someone else. That won't be necessary, I said. His face flickered, irritation, then something like panic. Why are you being stubborn? I almost laughed at the word stubborn, because for most of our marriage, he'd accused me of being too accommodating. I'm not being stubborn, I said. I'm being careful. He stared at me a beat too long, then moved aside with a forced shrug. Fine, do what you want. I went into the bedroom and closed the door gently. I didn't lock it. Locking would have been a signal. Signals make people improvise. I lay on top of the covers and waited until I heard his breathing change into sleep. Then I sat up and did the least dramatic thing in the world. I opened a notebook and wrote down the truth like it mattered. Time, 9:03 p.m. Derek said he called my supervisor. His words, "You've been under a lot of stress. In case you have a moment. People forget things." His tone, calm, proud, like he'd done something clever. My handwriting was shaky at first. Then it steadied, the way it always did when I had a job to do. Before bed, I stepped into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My face looked normal. Tired, yes, but normal. I practiced saying one sentence out loud quietly so it would sit in my mouth without trembling. Please put that in writing. In the morning, Derek was extra cheerful. He made breakfast like we were in a commercial about forgiveness, humming, clinking dishes, acting like last night hadn't happened. Morning, he said brightly. I thought we could take today easy. You don't have to go in if you don't feel up to it. I'm going in, I said, pouring my coffee. He paused. Marianne? I looked up. I like my job. He smiled like he was humoring a child. You can take a day. I already told them you might need time. My fingers tightened around the mug, but my voice stayed soft. I'll speak to them myself. His eyes narrowed, just for a second. I drove to work with my notebook in my bag and my stomach in my throat. At the employee entrance, my supervisor, Carla, met me before I even clocked in. Her face was careful, professional concern, the kind that tries to be kind while it measures risk. Marianne, she said gently, can we talk for a minute? I nodded, calm on the outside, though my pulse was loud in my ears. Carla led me toward her office, and as I followed her down the hallway, I realized Derek hadn't just called to help. He'd called to get there first, so when I spoke, I'd already sound like a woman defending herself. Carla's office smelled faintly like hand sanitizer and printer paper, the scent of a place where people come to confess things they didn't plan. She didn't sit behind her desk. She sat in the chair across from me, knees angled toward mine, like she wanted this to feel less like a meeting and more like a check-in. Marianne, she said softly, I got a call last night. I kept my face calm. From my husband. Carla nodded. He sounded concerned. He shouldn't have called you. I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it was. I'm asking, professionally, that the hospital not take personal updates from him. Carla's eyebrows lifted a fraction. Not judgment, just attention. I'm okay, I continued. I'm here. I'm fit for duty. If there are concerns about my performance, I want those concerns documented through the proper process. Carla blinked, and I could tell she heard what I was really saying. I am not going to let him write my story for me. She leaned back. Okay, tell me what's going on. I took out my notebook. My hands didn't shake this time. I didn't want to bring my home into work, I said, but he forced it when he called you. There's a financial issue I'm addressing. I'm in the middle of protecting my identity. That's all I can say right now without turning this into gossip. Carla exhaled slowly. Is it unsafe? Are you in danger? I wanted to laugh at how big that word sounded, danger, when the truth was quieter and meaner. I don't think he's going to hit me, I said. I think he's trying to make me look unreliable. Carla's mouth tightened. Okay. She stood, opened her door, and called down the hall. Tessa, can you step in for a minute? A woman from HR appeared with a folder in her hand and the expression of someone who'd already been told a version of me. Tessa smiled politely. Hi, Marianne. I nodded. Hi. Carla didn't waste time. Marianne wants to address the call we received from her husband. Marianne, go ahead. Tessa opened her folder. We received a concern that you've been under unusual stress and might need time off. I looked at Tessa and kept my voice gentle. I appreciate concern. I do not appreciate a third party contacting my employer. I'm not requesting time off. If you have questions about my work, I'm happy to answer them. Tessa hesitated. We just want to ensure patient safety. So do I. That's why I came in. And that's why I'm asking that any concerns be put in writing and handled through policy, not through my husband. The room went quiet, not hostile. Just the kind of quiet where people realize someone is choosing her words carefully. Tessa cleared her throat. Okay, we can document that you do not authorize anyone else to communicate on your behalf. Thank you, I said. And if he calls again, please tell him you can't discuss employees. Then let me know. Carla nodded, firm. We'll do that. Tessa softened slightly. Marianne, are you able to continue your shift today? I almost smiled because the honest answer was, I can continue my shift. I just can't continue my marriage. Yes, I said, I'm able. Carla walked Tessa out, then came back and closed the door again. I'm sorry, Carla said quietly. I didn't realize he was going to try to manage you through us. It's okay, I said. You did the right thing calling me in. Carla studied me for a moment. Then with the gentlest hint of humor, she said, for what it's worth, you're the most unstable person I've ever seen. You're practically frighteningly calm. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Small, tired, real. I'm saving the dramatic version for my kitchen, I said. Carla's eyes softened. If you need documentation from us later, you tell me. When I left her office, my phone vibrated in my pocket like an anxious heartbeat. 3 messages from Derek. 2 missed calls. I didn't open them. Not because I was brave, but because I was done feeding him information. By the end of my shift, Denise was waiting in the parking lot, arms folded, face set like she wanted to fight a storm. How'd it go? She asked. I asked them to put it in writing, I said. Denise let out a breath. Look at you, responsible, mature. I hate it. I wanted to throw something. I gave her a look. She lifted both hands. Kidding. Mostly. We drove to the police station together. The waiting room was too bright, the chairs too hard. A tired officer took my statement and nodded as I spoke like this was just another Tuesday, which somehow made it worse and better at the same time. When he slid the report number across the desk, my stomach flipped, because now it was official. Now there was a record of me saying out loud that my husband might be using my name like a tool. Denise squeezed my shoulder as we walked out. One foot in front of the other, she murmured. I nodded, even though my legs felt hollow. At home, Derek was waiting in the kitchen like he'd been rehearsing the lighting. He smiled. Too sweet. Too ready. There you are, he said. I've been worried sick. I set my bag down slowly. I had a long day. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. We need to go handle something tonight. It's time sensitive. They need you to verify a few details. Who's they? I asked. He held up a folder and a pen, like he couldn't help himself. Just people. Paperwork. It'll be quick. I looked at the pen in his hand. And all I could think was, he's not trying to comfort me. He's trying to finish. Derek held the folder and pen like he was offering me a shortcut. Come on, he said, lowering his voice. It's time sensitive. They just need you to verify a few details, and then we're done. I set my hands on the counter and looked at him the way I used to when he tried to talk me into something I didn't want. Calm, tired, agreeable. The version of me that made his life easy. Okay, I said. His shoulders loosened immediately, like a rope inside him went slack. Good, he said, too relieved. We'll go now. I reached for my coat, slow and ordinary, and I did the one thing Luis told me to do when someone is rushing you. I made it boring. I'm going to use the restroom first, I said. Derek sighed like I was wasting time, but he nodded. In the bathroom, I locked the door and texted Denise one word. Now. Then I stared at myself in the mirror for a heartbeat and whispered, stay boring. When I walked back out, Derek was already jingling his keys like impatience was a personality. You ready? Almost, I said. Where are we going? Just an office, he said. A notary, it's nothing. Notary, of course. Something official enough to scare you into signing, ordinary enough that nobody asks questions. We drove in silence. Derek's fingers kept tapping the steering wheel, and every few minutes he glanced at me like he was checking if I was still cooperating. When we pulled into a small strip of offices with dim lights and closed blinds, my stomach turned. One door had a simple sign, Notary Services. Derek parked too close to the curb like he couldn't wait. Inside, the room smelled like stale coffee and paper. A middle-aged woman sat behind a desk with reading glasses perched low on her nose. She looked up at us and smiled politely. Evening, she said. You folks need something notarized? Yes, Derek said quickly. My wife just needs to sign. The woman turned to me. ID, please. I handed it over. My hand didn't shake. Not because I wasn't scared, because I was done giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. She glanced at it, then looked at Derek's papers. What is this? Business authorization, Derek said. Just routine. The notary hummed, unimpressed. Routine always shows up at night when people are hungry. I almost smiled. The first honest person I'd met all week was a woman with a stamp and no patience. Then the door opened behind us. A familiar voice said, Sorry I'm late. Lauren walked in like she owned the air. She froze when she saw me fully facing her, like she'd expected me to be a signature, not a person. Derek's head snapped toward her, irritation flickering across his face. Lauren, he started. I'm helping, she said quickly, forcing a smile at the notary. I'm the office manager. We're just trying to wrap this up. The notary's eyes narrowed. Office manager, huh? I kept my gaze on the paperwork. Can you tell me what I'm signing? I asked, softly. Derek's jaw flexed. Marianne? I just need you to tell me, I repeated. Same tone, same calm. Lauren stepped closer, voice sweet. It's just a verification so the account stays active. It's already set up. This is the last step. Which account? I asked. Derek exhaled hard. Our business account. And why is there a mailbox address on it? I asked, still gentle, as if I'd simply noticed a typo. The room went still. Lauren's face tightened. Derek's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. What mailbox? Derek said. Too fast. This one, I said, tapping the line with my fingertip. I'd like you to say it out loud. Derek leaned in, voice low and sharp. Stop. I lifted my eyes to his. Please put it in writing, I said quietly. Explain it. Lauren's hand went to her purse like she was reaching for something. Her phone, maybe her keys, maybe a script. That's when the door opened again. Evening, a man's voice said, calm, official. Luis stepped inside, not in uniform, but with 2 officers behind him. Denise stood in the doorway for 1 second, arms folded, giving me a look that said, I told you boring works. Derek's face drained of color. Lauren backed up so fast she bumped the wall. The notary blinked and pushed her glasses up. Well, she said, flat as a pancake, this is new. One officer spoke. Derek Holt? Lauren Miles? You're being detained pending investigation for identity theft and fraud. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. This is my wife. She's confused. She's been stressed. Luis didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. She filed a report, he said. The bank filed a report. And you just tried to get her signature on an authorization tied to false contact information. Don't make it worse. The notary leaned back in her chair and muttered, I knew I should have gone home early. Denise snorted. I stood there, hands at my sides, feeling oddly weightless as Derek's world cracked open in a room that smelled like paper and stale coffee. Months later, the case moved the way real cases move, slow, paperwork heavy, grinding. But it moved. Derek took a plea. Lauren did too. The judge didn't care about their excuses. He cared about the records, the forged signature, the trail of mailboxes, the attempted authorization. When the sentence came down, I didn't feel victorious. I felt quiet. My credit was restored. The false accounts were closed. The house stayed mine. I went back to work without anyone asking me if I was having a moment. One afternoon, I found the bracelet again, hidden in the bottom of a drawer Derek never cleaned. I held it in my palm, that small cold circle that started all of this. I didn't throw it. I didn't wear it. I put it in a small box with my case papers, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. I stayed silent and watched, and I lived. The first week after the sentencing, I kept waiting for my body to go back to normal, like healing was a switch someone could flip. It wasn't. I'd be standing in the cereal aisle and my chest would tighten for no reason. I'd hear a pen click in a quiet room and my mind would jump, certain someone was about to slide paper in front of me again. Some nights I'd wake up angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. Then I'd remember the truth. I did see it. I just learned to see it quietly. Denise came over one Sunday with a pot of soup and that stubborn, loud love of hers. She stood in my kitchen and declared she was reclaiming the space with salt and carbs, like that was a legal strategy. I laughed so hard I cried, and for once the tears didn't feel like losing, they felt like pressure releasing. I started small. I took my walks again. I sat on the porch in the early morning when the neighborhood was still sleepy and the air felt clean. I stopped apologizing for taking up room. I stopped explaining myself to people who already decided who I was. My supervisor started treating me the way she always should have, like a professional, not a roomer. And near the end, when I finally believed the worst was behind me, I caught myself thinking about him one last time, not with rage, but with clarity. I thought the bracelet was the first warning. I was wrong. The moment that truly revealed him came later, when my life was on the line, and he had only 5 seconds to choose. He didn't choose me. But here's what I learned. His choice didn't get to be my ending. My ending was the quiet courage of doing the next right thing, even when my hands shook. It was asking for things in writing. It was protecting my name like it mattered. It was letting the truth stand on its own feet. And it was this, waking up one ordinary morning, making coffee, and realizing the air in my house felt soft again. Not because life became perfect, but because I did.